Earlier we did a little quick video on general maintenance, maintenance that we said was best to think of in terms of every 1,000 bales. This video is going to get a little more specific. We're going to do two things, talk about knotter maintenance, and I hate to use the word issue, but things that can occur that be troublesome for your knotter, and that's something you really want to avoid. So the most important thing I can tell you is after greasing it would be to use the proper string. The best string to get, and we'll talk about how the thickness of the string affects the performance, is get the 170 knot strength. Okay, a lot of times the size of the roll, the 9600 or 1100 or 1200, that's always pretty obvious. But the knot strength, sometimes you got to look pretty close to find out what kind of knot strength that the string is. It varies from, I think, 90, and then there's some 100, 120, 140, things like that. But the thicker stuff, the 170, is ideal. If you stick with this, might be a little problematic every once in a while trying to get it, but find a good supply of it and stick with 170. That's going to eliminate most of your problems. So another thing that is a common occurrence is the knot hanging on the bill hook. And I'm going to pop this knotter up and talk a little bit about the bill hook, about proper maintenance, and things that will eliminate that problem. Number one is the maintenance of the machine. So at every 5,000 bales, it would be good, it's a good thing to look at your knife arm. The knife arm is what, if you'll get a close-up of this, so your bill hook's right in here. You want this, you want the bottom of the knife arm to scrub hard against, or firmly, maybe not word hard isn't the right word, but firmly rub across the bottom of that bill hook. And then you also want it to make sure it's rubbing firmly all the way to the end of it, not just way back here, but all the way to the end. That's the action of that knife arm is what's going to take that knotter off the bill hook. I got to be careful here because it's a good place to get cut. On that knife arm is and here's a close-up of it. On this knife arm, you got the actual knife. So that's another thing to look at. Of course, that little blade there can get dull. The other thing, it can get bent. You want to keep an eye on that. Replacing that's relatively easy. You'd grind these two rivets off. There's little kits that are made where you replace the knife. They get a little bolt to replace that rivet. Pretty simple. And there's a little groove that I was talking about that's going to wipe across the bottom of that bill hook. So you can tell by rubbing across it time after time, that groove's gonna wear down in it, and so you'll have to, best thing to do is just tap on this. Don't beat on it with a sledgehammer, but just tap it to ensure you always have that good tight fit. I've got another piece of a knotter here that we might be able to look at and see this in more detail. Again, there's your knife arm, and you got the bill hook here, and that knife arm needs to come across there and wipe firmly across the bottom of that bill hook and ensure that it's coming out past the end of the bill hook. That's probably 3/4 of an inch to an inch, something like that. So while we're talking about that, on your knife arm, there's a roller on the end of the knife arm, and this roller eventually will get a flat spot and will limit the amount of travel. So every 5,000 bales or something, look at the condition of that, as well as making sure that has a good contact. on the bottom of the bill hook. So if you got good contact, good length of travel, the other thing you could do, and this probably be one of the more important things I say, is this spring right here. This is your twine tension spring. It's a flat spring, and the amount of pressure it puts on is affected by this bolt. So you got good, let's say you got good contact across the bottom of your bill hook with your knife arm, and you're still having some issues with that knot wanting to hang up on, stay on that bill hook and not come off. You can tighten this bolt. Start with just 1/8 of a turn. And see if that affects it, or go on to 1/4 of a turn. The 1/4 of a turn on that it'll do wonders on getting that knot off of that bill hook. So stay with a good 170 knot strength twine. Make sure your knife arm is making good contact with the bill hook, the entire length of the bill hook, and then make sure you have a good sharp blade on the end of your bill hook. Not on your bill hook, I'm sorry, on the end of your knife. And then still having issues, tighten that down 1/4 of a turn. I've got a pretty good knot here. So you got about 1 inch or 1 1/8 inch, something like that, of tail on the end of your knot. That's what you're looking for. And you're looking for a nice straight cut. If you see a lot of frayed edges on that, it's probably time to change that blade. And so if you tighten this down 1/8 and it doesn't work, and then you go to 1/4, eventually you're going to start shortening up the length of this tail on your knot. So this one's a good 1 inch, 1 1/8 or something like that. It's good length. When you get down to about 5/8 or something like that, you just need to be aware of, you've probably tightened that spring as much as you should. You shouldn't go any further with it. When you got a tail less than something in the neighborhood of 5/8 or less, just be aware that is probably as tight as you should, much tension as you should put on that spring. Another thing that you'll want to look at every 5,000 bales or something like that, you probably noticed, I'll pull this pin back out of here. You probably noticed that moving this knotter up and down, you can do it with a fair amount of force. It's not, it's firm but yet movable. The knotter's going to see so much action that every 5,000 bales or something, if you pull one of these knotters up to look at it, and it just freely goes up and falls back down. It's free. It's not firm like this one is. It's still movable, but it's firm. If it gets a lot of play in it, the way to adjust that is, you can see this bolt, back this bolt out, and tighten it right here. Loosen that up, give you a little slack there, and then tighten this up maybe a 1/2 turn or a turn. You'll see that it's quickly beginning to bring the knotter stack back together, and taking that excess play or that excess wear out of it. So the intent here is to make this machine work for you trouble-free. And so just going through some of the things that with the knotter system, that you need to look at it every 5,000 bales, or if you're having problems, some ideas on how to maintain it in a trouble-free type production.